The second-floor landing of the Ashmore Hotel smelled of fresh varnish and old oak. Holt Reeves knelt at the foot of the staircase, fingers tracing a seam in the newel post. Harlow Bennington bent beside him to read the blueprint resting across his knee, her hair almost touching his shoulder. 2 contractors passed below. One whistled. Holt stood, brushed sawdust from his jeans, and offered a small smile. "Careful, people might think we're together." Harlow did not look up. She turned the page. Her voice was quiet, meant only for him. Would that be so bad? Holt did not answer. The hammer hung loose in his hand. If you enjoy slow-burn stories where dignity speaks louder than declarations, hit subscribe and stay with us until the last door closes. 6 weeks before that afternoon on the landing, Constance Foster sat alone in her office on the ground floor of the Ashmore. The hotel was empty in the way only old buildings can be empty, still breathing, still listening. On her desk lay a thick set of architectural drawings from Vance & Cole, an Atlanta firm Halston Hospitality had hired to lead the renovation. Constance had read the drawings twice. The second time, he had drawn a small red circle around a wall on the second floor and written one word in the margin: structural. She closed the folder. From a leather notebook older than most of her staff, she copied out a phone number she had not called in 4 years. Holt picked up on the third ring. He was in the workshop on the riverbank, sanding a piece of black walnut. The afternoon light came in low through the open door. Constance did not waste words. "The Ashmore is being renovated. I need someone who understands how the bones of that building go together. I'm offering a small contract. Floor restoration on the 3rd floor, door work on the main entrance. 6 weeks. Holt set the sander down. "Who's the architect?" "A firm out of Atlanta. They don't have the original drawings." He understood at once. He did not ask why she was calling him specifically. Constance had been Rebecca's aunt, and after the funeral she had stayed quietly in his life, the way some people stay without intruding, without forgetting. When she asked for something, he said yes. He said yes. That Saturday, Hazel came with him. She was 9 years old, freckled at the bridge of her nose, with her mother's red hair tied back loosely. She brought her sketchbook because the alternative was sitting at home with the babysitter, and Hazel preferred sawdust to television. She sat up in the lobby on a folded drop cloth, knees tucked under her, drawing the front of the hotel from memory. She added a balcony on the 3rd floor that was not there. She drew it because the building looked like it wanted one. Harlow Bennington walked through the front doors at 10:30 that morning. She was in Savannah for the first time as the new owner of the Ashmore. She wore a charcoal coat over a cream blouse, low heels, a leather folio under her arm. She did not look like a woman who had spent 3 days arguing with contractors. She looked like a woman who had won those arguments. She stopped when she saw the child. Hazel looked up, unbothered. Harlow knelt without hesitation, her coat folded around her knees. "What are you drawing?" "The hotel. It doesn't have that balcony." "I know," Hazel said. "But it wants one." Harlow smiled. It was a smaller smile than she had given anyone in months. Holt came down the staircase a minute later with a measuring tape over his shoulder and stopped at the bottom step. The chief executive of the company that now owned the building was sitting on the floor with his daughter. He had not expected that. He cleared his throat. "Holt Reeves. I'm doing the restoration work for Mrs. Foster." Harlow stood, brushed off her coat, and held out her hand. "Harlow Bennington. I own the hotel." Their handshake was brief and even. She looked at him a half-second longer than she needed to. He noticed. Neither of them said anything about it. 2 weeks passed in the rhythm of a working building. Holt arrived at 6 in the morning with a thermos of black coffee. He left at 4. Hazel came after school on Wednesdays and Fridays. Harlow flew between Boston and Savannah on a schedule that left her exhausted but did not slow her down. On a Tuesday in the 3rd week, the Vance & Cole team joined a video call to walk Halston's leadership through the next phase. The lead architect proposed removing an interior wall on the 2nd floor to expand the restaurant footprint. He called the wall a partition. He said it was non-load-bearing. Grant Wheeler, joining from the Boston office, agreed enthusiastically. "Speed up the timeline. Move on." Harlow listened without comment. Her pen tapped twice against her notebook. Holt was working 20 feet from the open conference room door. He heard every word. He did not raise his voice. He did not knock. He went back to his sanding, finished the section he was on, packed his tools, and went home. That night, by lamplight in the workshop, he drew 3 sheets by hand. One showed the load distribution of the second-floor wall in question. One showed the columns labeled B4 through B7, with their tributary loads written beside them in pencil. The third was a single sentence at the bottom of a blank page. Remove this wall, and the third floor begins to sag inside 18 months. He left the 3 sheets on Harlow's desk before she arrived the next morning. She found them at 7. She read them twice. She read them a third time. The handwriting was not the handwriting of a carpenter. The terminology was not the terminology of a man who worked with his hands for a living. It was the precise, controlled lettering of an engineer who had drawn load diagrams 1,000 times. She walked down to the lobby and found Constance arranging fresh hydrangeas on the front desk. "Who is he, Constance?" Constance did not turn around. She tucked one more stem into the vase and stepped back to look at it. "He is the man my niece loved. That's all I will tell you." Harlow hired an independent firm out of Charleston to review the Vance and Cole proposal that afternoon. The Charleston engineers took 2 days. Their report was 4 pages. The conclusion fit on the first line: removing the wall would result in catastrophic structural failure within 12 to 20 months. Holt had been generous. Harlow drove to the workshop on the riverbank at sunset. She had never been there. She found him planing a length of oak, sleeves rolled to the elbow, sawdust in his forearm hair. She did not knock. He looked up. "Why didn't you say something in the meeting?" He did not stop planing. No one hires a carpenter for his opinion. She watched him work for a moment. The light off the river caught the side of his face. "I'm hiring." His hand stopped on the plane. He set the tool down very carefully, the way a man sets down something he is afraid to drop. "For what?" "Restoration consultant. Full contract. The rest of the project." He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded once. "All right." The next morning, he was on the second floor at 6 o'clock as usual. But he was wearing a different shirt, and Harlow noticed. The rhythm of the building changed. Holt and Harlow moved through it side by side now. He coordinated the restoration crew on materials, joinery, and finish. She managed the broader project finance, scheduling, the Historic District Commission, the press. They argued about varnish tones and railing heights, and the question of whether to keep the original brass door hardware or replace it with reproductions. They argued the way 2 professionals argue when neither one is willing to lose the building. The crew noticed before either of them did. They stood too close when they looked at drawings. Harlow laughed more often than she had in 2 years. Holt stayed past 5, for reasons he did not name, even to himself. Hazel kept coming on Wednesdays and Fridays. She stopped drawing the building and started drawing people. She drew her father at the bottom of a staircase. She drew Harlow holding a coffee cup. She drew herself, between them, on a third-floor balcony that still did not exist. On a Thursday afternoon late in the 4th week, rain came through Savannah without warning. Harlow had walked from the parking lot to the hotel without an umbrella and was waiting under the portico for the worst of it to pass. Hazel ran from the car a minute later, jacket pulled over her head, laughing. Harlow lifted her own coat and held it over the child like a roof. They walked into the lobby together. Holt followed, carrying his tools, watching them. Constance saw them from the second-floor window. She watched until they were inside. Then she turned away from the glass and pressed a hand to her chest. That night, Holt lay in the small bedroom above the workshop. He could hear the river through the open window. He thought about Rebecca, the way he had thought about her every night for 4 years. He did not know if a man was allowed to feel relief on an afternoon when his wife had been dead for 51 months. He had no answer for the question. He fell asleep with it still in his mouth. In Boston, Harlow called her younger sister Iris on speakerphone while she pulled on a sweater. "How's the South?" Iris asked. "Hot. The renovation is on track. Anyone interesting?" There was a pause. Harlow turned the lamp off. "There's a consultant. He's good. Just good. Good night, Iris." Iris let it go. She had heard the pause. The next evening, Holt and Hazel ate dinner on the back porch of the river house. He had grilled fish. She had grilled bread. The crickets had started. "Dad," Hazel said. Does Miss Harlow have a family?" He set down his fork. "She has a big job. That's not a family." He did not answer. He looked out over the water. After a moment, Hazel slid off her chair, walked around the table, and leaned against his arm without saying anything else. He put his hand on the back of her head and left it there until the bread had gone cold. The next morning, when Harlow arrived on site, Holt held the lobby door open for her without thinking about it. She walked through it without thinking about it. The crew noticed. So did Constance. So did Holt, an hour later, sitting on a sawhorse with a cup of coffee, realizing he had stopped counting the days. Grant Wheeler arrived in Savannah on a Tuesday morning in the 5th week. He brought one assistant, one rolling suitcase, and a smile that did not warm anything. He said he had come for a site inspection. He spent 2 days walking the building with a clipboard. He did not ask Holt a single question. He asked the crew several. He stood across the ballroom from Harlow during a brief meeting and watched the way she turned to Holt when a question about ceiling joists came up. He watched the way Holt leaned in slightly when he answered. He took out his phone and took a picture of the two of them at the meeting table. No one noticed. He took several more pictures over the next 40 hours. None of them were scandalous. All of them told a story. On Wednesday afternoon, Grant invited Holt to a coffee shop 2 blocks from the hotel. He paid for both drinks. He sat down across from Holt and folded his hands. "You're local, right? I imagine this contract is unusual for a small operation like yours." Holt sipped his coffee. "It is. I'd be careful about getting too comfortable. People like Miss Bennington don't stay in places like this. She'll go back to Boston eventually. The Ashmore will go on without her. And without you." Holt set down his cup. He paid for his own coffee, even though it had already been paid for. He left a $5 bill on the table and walked out. That afternoon on site, Holt kept his distance. He routed every question to the foreman. He addressed Harlow only as Miss Bennington in front of the crew, even when no one was listening. Harlow registered the change in fewer than 5 minutes. She did not ask him why. She knew. That evening, Constance found Holt in the back office, washing his hands at the small sink. "Wheeler is not the kind of man you fight with a wrench." "I don't fight. That's why I'm telling you. He doesn't fight either. He moves pieces. Don't be one." Holt dried his hands on a clean rag. "I'm not on his board." Constance looked at him for a long moment. "You're on the board he's making." He thought about that all the way home. The next day, Holt stayed on the 3rd floor for most of the morning, working alone on the door frames. He was good at being alone. He had been alone for 4 years. It used to feel like rest. Today, it felt like absence. At lunch, Harlow walked up to the 3rd floor with 2 coffees and 1 apple split in half. She set the apple on the windowsill beside him. She did not say anything. She drank her coffee, looked out the window at the live oaks in the courtyard, and walked back downstairs. He ate the apple. That evening, after the crew was gone, Harlow stood on the 3rd floor balcony, the one that did not exist in Hazel's drawings but did in fact exist on the east side of the building, narrow and wrought iron, and original to 1898. She looked down into the courtyard. Holt was locking the work van. He looked up. Their eyes met across 40 feet of evening air. Both of them looked away. Both of them looked back, a half-second later than they should have. Halston Hospitality held a soft opening preview at the end of the 5th week. The guest list was small by design: a dozen Boston investors, the chair of the Savannah Historic District Commission, 2 reporters from regional travel publications, and 3 members of Halston's board. Harlow needed the evening to go perfectly. Grant made certain the board members were on the flight. He also made certain that they sat at the table closest to the bar, where they could watch Harlow move through the room. Holt was not on the guest list. He was a contractor. Contractors do not attend openings, but Constance had asked him to come in early to check the ballroom floor, freshly finished and not yet walked on. He arrived at 5 o'clock in a clean flannel shirt, dark jeans, and the boots he had worn into the building every day for 6 weeks. He inspected the floor on his hands and knees. He stood and was about to leave when guests began arriving through the front doors. He turned toward the service exit. Harlow caught him there. She was in a dark green dress and low heels. She had her hand on the doorframe. "Stay." He shook his head. "I'm not dressed for it. You built half of what's in this room. Stay." He stayed. For most of the evening, he stood by the back wall of the ballroom with a glass of water. He spoke to no one. He watched Harlow work the room, the practiced smile, the firm handshake, the precise small talk about Savannah's preservation ordinances. Halfway through the evening, a Boston investor asked Harlow about her restoration philosophy. Why keep the original wood? Why keep the original windows? Wasn't modernization the smarter play? Harlow turned, found Holt at the back wall, and lifted her chin slightly. My consultant can answer that better than I can. Every head turned. Holt walked to the front of the room slowly. He did not adjust his shirt. He did not clear his throat. He took the question and answered it in 5 sentences. He spoke about how a building remembers what it was made for. He spoke about the way old oak holds tension differently from new lumber. He said nothing about himself. The investor nodded. So did the chair of the Historic Commission. Grant, at his table by the bar, made a small note on his phone. When the room broke up, the guests drifted out through the front doors and into the warm Savannah night. The string quartet packed up. The catering staff began clearing glasses. Holt walked out the side door to the courtyard. He stood under the largest of the live oaks, where Spanish moss hung low enough to brush his shoulder. Harlow followed him out a minute later. He did not look at her. He looked at the front of the hotel he had just spoken about. "Careful," he said quietly. "People might think we're together." She did not move. Would that be so bad? He did not answer. He did not walk away. They stood under the live oak together, neither of them speaking, neither of them moving. For the length of time it took the last of the catering vans to pull out of the driveway. Then they walked back inside separately, and neither of them looked at the other for the rest of the night. Grant's email went out at 6 the next morning. It went to every member of the Halston board. The subject line read, "Governance Concern Savannah Project." The attachments were 5 photographs of Holt and Harlow on the site. None of them showed anything. All of them showed too much. There was a chart of the project's revised timeline, marked with delays Grant himself had quietly caused through last-minute supplier changes. There was a 1-page summary recommending the board review Harlow's leadership. By 8, Harlow was on a video call with 5 board members. The questions were direct. She answered them flatly. She did not raise her voice. She did not defend the relationship because she was not, in any actionable sense, in one. When the call ended, she closed her laptop and sat for 10 minutes without moving. Then she walked through the lobby, up the stairs, and onto the second floor, where Holt was kneeling beside a doorframe. "Mr. Reeves." He looked up. He knew before she spoke. "From now on, all communication goes through email. We do not meet privately. We do not stand within 10 feet of one another on this site. The contract continues. The work continues. Nothing else." He nodded. She did not wait for him to say anything. She walked back down the stairs. 3 days passed. Holt worked. Harlow worked. The crew noticed the shift but said nothing. The hotel kept moving toward completion. Every conversation between Holt and Harlow was professional, exact, and as short as the work would allow. They both became very good at not looking at each other. On the morning of the 4th day, Constance closed her office door behind Harlow and laid 3 things on the desk between them. The first was a photocopy of a roster from Hollister and Vane Structural Engineering, dated 2011, the Ashmore Hotel Restoration Project. The name Holt Reeves was halfway down the list, under Junior Structural Engineer. The second was a photograph in a small wooden frame. A man of 25, dark-haired, sunburned, standing on the sidewalk in front of the hotel with his arm around a young woman with red hair. They were laughing at something out of frame. The woman was Rebecca. The third was a single sheet of paper, more recent. A notice from Hollister and Vane confirming that Holt Reeves remained a silent partner of the firm. He had not resigned. He had only stopped taking projects. The notice was 4 years old. Constance spoke without sitting. "My niece's name was Rebecca Foster. Holt was her husband. She died in Boston 4 years ago. He brought their daughter back here because Rebecca's parents had given them the workshop on the river. I have looked after him from a distance since then because that is what an aunt does. I called him for this contract because I knew Vance and Cole would fail. He came because he trusts me. He did not know I was bringing him back into the world. I'm telling you now because you deserve to know who he is, and because he will never tell you himself." Harlow looked at the photograph for a long time. She did not pick it up. She did not need to. She understood, finally, why he knew every beam of the building, why he had stayed silent in the meeting, why the joke about being together was not a joke. It was the language of a man who had taught himself, for 4 years, to keep every door closed. Harlow did not go to Holt that night. She did not call him. She did not write. She went to her hotel suite, opened her laptop, and reread an audit report she had commissioned 3 weeks earlier and not yet shared with anyone. The report had arrived in her inbox the morning of the soft opening. She had been waiting for the right moment to use it. The audit had been conducted by Deloitte's forensic division. Its subject was every logistics and procurement decision made by Grant Wheeler in the previous 6 months. The report ran to 91 pages. The summary fit on 3. In the past 5 months, Grant had changed material suppliers on the Savannah project 3 separate times, always at the last minute, always introducing delays of 9 to 14 days. Each replacement supplier had a documented financial link through 1 or 2 intermediary entities to Drew Bennington Harlow's former husband. The pattern was not deniable. Harlow forwarded the report to the chair of the Halston board at midnight, with a single line in the body of the email: "Emergency session tomorrow, 8 a.m. Eastern. This is the agenda." The video meeting opened on time. Grant joined from Boston in a navy blazer, looking unrushed. Harlow walked through the report page by page. She did not editorialize. She let the timestamps and the supplier records and the digital fingerprints do the talking. Every email Grant had sent, every signature, every wire transfer routed through subsidiaries. Grant tried once to push back. These reports can be manipulated. The dates are suggestive, not conclusive. The chair of the board, a woman in her 60s named Eleanor Ash, did not look up from her notes. "Deloitte stands behind this audit." "Are you accusing Deloitte of fraud, Mr. Wheeler?" Grant said nothing. "Step out of the call, please." He left. The vote was unanimous. Grant was terminated for cause. Halston's legal team was instructed to refer the matter to outside counsel for review of possible civil action. The call ended at 9:15. Harlow closed the laptop. Her hands were steady. Her face was not. In Boston, Grant made one final call before security escorted him from the building. He called Andrew Hollister, the founding partner of Hollister & Vane. He told Andrew that Holt Reeves was in Savannah, working as a carpenter under contract with Halston Hospitality. He hoped Andrew would react. He hoped, in some small way, to drag Holt into the wreckage with him. Andrew Hollister listened. He thanked Grant for the information. He hung up. Then he called Holt. Holt was on the riverbank, sitting on the dock with a bottle of beer he had not opened, watching the sun go down. He answered on the second ring. Andrew did not raise his voice. He had been Holt's mentor for 15 years. He had spoken at Rebecca's funeral. "Son, are you ready to come back to the drawing board?" "I don't know." "Then stay there. The chair will still be here. When you know, call me." Holt set the phone down beside him. He looked at the water. That night, Holt drove to the Ashmore. The crew was gone. The cleaners were finishing the ballroom. Harlow was sitting alone at one of the round dinner tables, the chairs around her stacked except for the one she was using. He sat down beside her without asking. She looked at him. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" "Because I didn't want to be him anymore." The silence held. "But you are standing in the building I measured when I was 25. And it was where I met Rebecca. And I don't know what to do with that." She did not touch him. "You don't have to be him. But stop pretending he never existed." He did not answer. He did not need to. The board reconvened on Friday morning for the formal motion. Grant, no longer an employee, was permitted to attend by phone as a courtesy. He requested time to present his concerns about Harlow's leadership. He used 11 minutes. He cited the timeline. He cited the cost overruns. He cited carefully a personal entanglement with a local contractor that has compromised the chief executive's judgment. Harlow took the floor next. She presented the same Deloitte audit again, this time for the full board. She showed that every cost overrun could be traced to Grant's supplier changes. She showed that every timeline delay had originated from his desk. She produced the Charleston Structural Review, confirming that Vance and Cole's original design would have caused a partial collapse of the building. She produced the consulting contract with Holt Reeves, dated, signed, legally reviewed. She did not defend any relationship. She defended a hiring decision. Then, unexpectedly, a letter arrived in the board's email queue. It was from Andrew Hollister, on Hollister & Vane letterhead. He confirmed that Holt Reeves was among a small group of engineers on the eastern seaboard with documented expertise in 19th-century landmark restoration. He confirmed that hiring Reeves for the Ashmore was, in his professional judgment, the correct decision. He did not address any other matter. He did not need to. The motion to remove Harlow as chief executive was withdrawn. The motion to retain her was unanimous. The call ended. Harlow walked from the conference room into the hotel's lobby, through the front doors, and out onto the brick sidewalk. The mid-morning sun was high. The live oaks shaded everything below them. She stood at the curb and breathed. She had kept her company. She had kept her project. She had kept everything she had built since the divorce. It did not feel like winning. It felt like waking up. She walked back inside. In the corridor that led from the lobby to the back stairs, Constance had finally hung something on the wall that she had been holding for 2 weeks. A blueprint, framed in plain dark wood, the original structural drawing of the Ashmore's East Wing, dated April of 2011. At the bottom right, in pencil, 3 initials and a signature, H. Reeves, Junior Engineer. Harlow stopped in front of the frame. She placed her palm flat against the glass. She had walked past that wall every day for 6 weeks. She had not known the signature was there. She had not known anything. She let her hand fall. She thought about Rebecca then, for the first time without resentment, about the timing of any of it. She thought about a woman she had never met, who had once stood somewhere near this corridor at the age of 24, with a man who had measured every beam of the building. She did not have the right to thank Rebecca for anything, but she stood in the corridor for another minute anyway, with the woman she had never met, before she walked on. That evening, she did not look for him. She did not need to. He came up the back stairs at 5 o'clock with his tool bag over his shoulder, as he had every day for 6 weeks. He passed the framed blueprint. He stopped. He looked at his own 25-year-old signature for a long time. When he turned, Harlow was at the end of the hall. They did not speak. He nodded. She nodded. He walked past her, down the corridor, out into the courtyard. The understanding between them was not yet a decision. It was the absence of pretending. It was the first thing built between them that did not require either of them to look away. 10 days passed. The project moved into its final phase. The marble at the main entrance was replaced. The brass hardware was polished. The third-floor windows were reglazed with period-correct glass. Holt's contract had 2 weeks left on it. On a Tuesday evening at the dinner table, Hazel set down her fork. "Dad, when the hotel is done, are we going back to the workshop full-time?" "Yes." "Is Miss Harlow staying in Savannah?" Holt put down his own fork. He looked at his daughter. She was 9. She had her mother's eyes and her mother's stubbornness about questions she had already decided the answer to. "I don't know yet. I don't want her to leave." He did not answer that. He had not yet earned the right to. On Saturday, Holt finished the last piece of work on the project. The main entrance door, 8 feet of original oak, restored in 8 weeks of careful joinery. Every dovetail and mortise tested twice. He stood on the sidewalk and looked at it. It was the building he had measured 15 years ago. He had been 25 then. He had not yet known the woman he would marry. He had not yet known the daughter she would give him. He had not yet known the 4 years of not living that would come after. The door was good, better than he had imagined it. Harlow came out onto the sidewalk and sat down on the cast-iron bench beside the front steps. The same bench from the night of the soft opening. He sat down next to her without being asked. The square was quiet. "Halston is considering a regional office for the Southeast," she said. "The plan is to base it in Savannah." He looked at her. "I would oversee it. I'd be here at least 2 years, probably longer." He took a moment. He let the words settle in the right place. "Andrew wants me back at Hollister and Vane. I've been thinking about something else. A small practice. Heritage restoration. 2, 3 projects a year. I'd take what I learned in Boston and use it here. In Savannah. In Savannah. Hazel has a school here. Her grandparents are in Rebecca's old church cemetery 1/2 mile from the workshop. We were always going to stay." She nodded. "Then both of us are staying," she said. "Then both of us are staying," he repeated. He did not take her hand. She did not take his. They sat on the bench under the live oak. A horse-drawn carriage passed at the far end of the square, the way they did every evening in the old district. A street lamp came on above their heads. The light was the color of warm brass. He spoke first. "Hazel asked about you tonight. What did she say?" "She didn't want you to leave." Harlow looked down at her hands. She did not smile, but her mouth changed. "Tell her she doesn't have to worry." He nodded once. At some point, she shifted slightly on the bench, not by design, just by gravity. Her shoulder touched his sleeve. Neither of them moved. A church bell rang the hour somewhere beyond the park. He counted it without meaning to. 8 strikes. He used to count things to keep his mind from drifting away from a thought he could not finish. Tonight he counted because he wanted to remember what the hour had sounded like. A man walked a dog past the bench. He nodded at them without slowing. He took them for what they looked like. They sat on the bench until the light over the square had gone fully blue, and the air had cooled, and neither of them needed to say anything else. 6 weeks later, the Ashmore Hotel reopened officially, the lobby filled with light. The ballroom held 200 guests, reporters from the Savannah Morning News, 3 regional travel magazines, the chair of the Historic District Commission, and the mayor's office moved through the rooms with cocktails. The string quartet played quietly under the staircase Holt had restored. Harlow gave the opening remarks from the landing of that staircase. She thanked the construction crew, the design team, the Historic District Commission. She thanked by name every member of her project leadership, and then, in the second-to-last sentence of her speech, she said this, "And our restoration consultant, the man who made sure this building stands the way it was meant to stand 112 years ago, who never asked to be thanked, who, I am told, will not stand when I say his name." She did not say his name. The room laughed gently. Holt, at the back of the ballroom standing next to Constance, did not stand. Constance smiled into her champagne flute. "He knows who he is," Constance murmured. "I do," Holt said. After the speech, Hazel made her way through the crowd carrying a folded piece of paper. She found Harlow near the bar and tugged the hem of her dress. Harlow knelt. Hazel handed her the paper. It was a new drawing. The Ashmore from the front, in colored pencil, with a third-floor balcony that did not exist. On the balcony stood 3 figures, a man, a woman, and a child. "Do you like it?" Hazel asked. Harlow looked at the drawing for a long moment. She put her hand on Hazel's shoulder. "I love it. I'll hang it in my new office in Savannah." "With the balcony?" "With the balcony." Hazel smiled and ran off to find the chocolate fountain. The night ended slowly. Guests drifted out through the front doors. The catering team began stacking glasses. The lights in the chandeliers dimmed by half. Holt stood by the front entrance. The 8-foot oak door he had finished 6 weeks earlier was propped fully open. Harlow walked toward him through the empty lobby. She stopped just short of the threshold. He looked at the door, not at her. "Good door." She looked at him. "Better builder." He did not reach for her hand. He reached for the door instead. He pushed it open a few more inches, stepped to the side, and gestured for her to walk through first. She stepped over the threshold. Then she stopped on the sidewalk outside and turned to look back at him. He stepped through the door after her. He stood beside her on the brick. 6 months later, a small wooden sign hung over a doorway on a side street near the river. Reeves Heritage Restoration. The lettering had been carved by hand. 2 blocks away, a brass plaque on a new office building read Halston Hospitality Southeast Regional. Hazel started 4th grade with a backpack she had decorated herself, a folded drawing pinned to the inside flap. A man, a woman, and a child on a balcony that had finally been built. On a Saturday morning, the 3 of them walked through Forsyth Park. They did not hold hands. They walked beside one another, close enough that anyone watching would have known, and far enough that no one needed to say a name. That oak door was the first door in 4 years he had closed behind him that was not a goodbye.